His heart stopped for 6 seconds. The word struck Jungkook before he had even reached the ICU doors. He stopped running. For one terrible second, the entire hospital corridor seemed to disappear beneath the sound of his own breathing. "What did you say?" The doctor looked at him with grave eyes. "Your friend suffered a cardiac arrest before we stabilized him." Jungkook's face drained of color. "Jimin?" The doctor nodded. Behind the glass doors, nurses moved rapidly around a hospital bed. White coats flashed beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Machines screamed and beeped. A red indicator blinked above the ICU entrance. Jungkook stepped forward. "Let me see him." "You need to wait." "No." His voice cracked. "Please, that's Jimin." The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're doing everything we can." Jungkook stared through the glass. He could barely recognize the person lying beneath the white sheets. Jimin looked too still, too pale, too fragile. Only hours earlier, Jungkook had received a message from him. "Don't worry about me. I'm just tired." That was all. 6 words. Jungkook had replied with a laughing emoji and told him to get some sleep. Now he wished he could tear that message out of existence. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. "Why didn't you call me?" His voice became a whisper. "Why did you say you were fine?" The rain outside hammered against the windows. Jungkook closed his eyes. He remembered Jimin smiling that afternoon. He remembered the way Jimin had rubbed his wrist while waiting for rehearsal to begin. He remembered asking, "Are you nervous?" "Just tired." Jungkook had believed him. That was the part that hurt. He had believed him. A nurse finally opened the door. "You can go in for a few minutes." Jungkook entered. The smell of antiseptic immediately filled his lungs. He walked slowly toward the bed. Jimin's face was peaceful now, but the machines surrounding him told another story. Jungkook pulled a chair beside the bed. He reached for Jimin's hand. It was warm. That tiny warmth nearly destroyed him. "You're still here." His voice trembled. "So stay." He lowered his head. "You can yell at me later." "Nothing." "You can call me annoying." "Nothing." "You can steal my food." His lips trembled. "Just wake up." The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Jungkook stayed there until morning. He didn't know that Jimin had been hiding something for months. He didn't know that the hospital wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the moment everything Jimin had buried finally came to the surface. 3 weeks earlier, Jimin had stood alone inside an empty rehearsal room. The music had stopped. The mirrors reflected his exhausted face from every direction. He placed both hands on the dance floor and lowered his head. His breathing was uneven. His phone vibrated. Jungkook. Jimin stared at the name. He smiled faintly. Then he turned the phone face down. He didn't answer. Because if he answered, Jungkook would hear the exhaustion in his voice. And if Jungkook heard it, he would ask questions. Jimin wasn't ready to answer them. He had become very good at hiding pain. A smile before breakfast. A joke during rehearsal. A cheerful message at midnight. "I'm fine." 3 words that had become almost automatic. But every night, when he was alone, the smile disappeared. He would sit beside his bedroom window with a cup of tea that gradually became cold. He had developed a strange habit. Whenever he felt overwhelmed, he counted the lights in the buildings across the street. 1, 2, 3, 4. It gave him something simple to control. That night, there were 37 lights. He counted them twice. Then his phone vibrated again. Jungkook. Jimin finally answered. "Hey! You sound tired." Jimin smiled despite himself. "You always say that. Because you're always tired. I'll sleep soon." "You promise." Jimin looked at the dark window. "I promise." It was a lie. But it was a gentle lie. At least that was what Jimin told himself. He didn't realize how much longer he could keep pretending. Episode 2. When Jimin finally opened his eyes in the ICU, the first thing he saw was Jungkook asleep beside his bed. Jimin stared at him. His friend had dark circles beneath his eyes. His hair was messy. One hand remained wrapped around Jimin's fingers. Jimin tried to move. Jungkook woke immediately. Jimin? Jimin blinked. You stayed. Jungkook looked almost offended. Of course I stayed. Jimin smiled weakly. You should go home. No. You look terrible. You nearly died. Jimin's smile disappeared. Jungkook leaned closer. Don't ever do that to me again. Jimin looked toward the window. I didn't mean to. I know. A silence followed. Then Jungkook asked the question Jimin had been dreading. What happened? Jimin didn't answer. Jimin. I don't know. Don't lie. Jimin closed his eyes. Jungkook's voice softened. Please. Jimin swallowed. I was tired. You've been tired for months. Jimin opened his eyes. You noticed. Not enough. The guilt in Jungkook's voice was impossible to miss. Jimin reached for his hand. This isn't your fault. But I should have known. No. I should have asked again. No. I should have. Jungkook. Jimin squeezed his fingers. Stop punishing yourself. Jungkook looked away. His eyes were wet. You're the one in the hospital, and somehow I'm the one who feels like I failed. Jimin's expression softened. Because you love too hard. Jungkook looked back at him. Jimin immediately realized what he had said. Neither spoke. The room suddenly felt smaller. Jimin turned toward the window. I was afraid of that. Afraid of what? Of how much you care. Jungkook stared at him. Why would that frighten you? Because I knew you would stay. Jungkook didn't understand. Jimin continued quietly. I've spent my whole life trying not to become someone's burden. You aren't. I know you say that. Because it's true. But I didn't believe it. Jungkook's jaw tightened. What made you believe you had to handle everything alone? Jimin's eyes became distant. Something happened. What? Jimin hesitated. A message. Jungkook frowned. What message? Jimin looked at him. Someone told me that if I ever talked about what was happening, people I cared about would suffer. Jungkook's expression changed. Who? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. You don't know? The messages came from an unknown number. Jungkook stood. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. Of the person sending them? Yes. Jungkook looked toward the door. We need to tell someone. Please. There was desperation in his voice. Jungkook slowly sat again. Fine. But promise me something. What? Don't investigate this alone. Jungkook stared at him. I promise. Jimin knew immediately that Jungkook was lying. He knew that expression. It was the same expression Jungkook had whenever he had already made a decision. Jungkook would investigate. He would search for answers. And eventually, he would discover why Jimin had been so afraid. That afternoon, Jungkook found the first clue. It was inside Jimin's hospital bag. A small envelope. No return address. No name. Only a single sentence written across the front. You should have listened to me. Jungkook's fingers went cold. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. Jimin and Jungkook stood together outside the rehearsal building. His heart began pounding. He immediately looked toward the ICU window. Jimin was asleep. Jungkook folded the photograph and slipped it into his pocket. For the first time, he realized the problem wasn't simply Jimin's health. Someone had been watching them. Someone knew Jimin's secrets. And someone wanted Jungkook to discover them. Jungkook waited until Jimin woke. Then he placed the photograph on the table. Jimin's face changed instantly. You found it. You know what this is? Jimin nodded. You knew someone was following you. I suspected. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know who to trust. Jungkook's voice became quiet. You could trust me. I know. Then why? Jimin looked at him. Because I was afraid you'd blame yourself. For what? Jimin looked down. 3 nights before I collapsed, I received a message. What did it say? Jimin hesitated. They said I had one chance to disappear quietly. Jungkook's eyes widened. What? I thought it was a threat. It was. No. Jimin shook his head. It was a warning. A warning about what? Jimin's voice became barely audible. Something happening behind the scenes. Jungkook sat beside him. Tell me everything. Jimin took a deep breath. There were people spreading information about us. What information? Private schedules, locations, conversations. Jungkook's expression hardened. Who had access? I don't know. Think. Jimin closed his eyes. There was someone who always seemed to know where we were. Who? Jimin. I never saw their face. The door opened. A man entered carrying a folder. Jungkook immediately stood. Who are you? The man showed identification. I'm an investigator. Jungkook frowned. Who hired you? An anonymous client. About Jimin? Yes. Jimin looked at him in surprise. You found me? I found the person who was monitoring you. Jungkook stepped closer. Who? The investigator opened the folder. Someone within your professional circle. Jimin's face became pale. That's impossible. Unfortunately, it isn't. The investigator showed them several documents. Private schedules. Hospital information. Travel details. Messages. Everything had been collected over months. Jungkook stared at the evidence. Why? The investigator shook his head. We haven't established the motive. Then what do we know? The person responsible never directly attacked Jimin. What? They manipulated circumstances. Jimin whispered. They wanted me to disappear. Why? The investigator looked at Jungkook. Because they believed your closeness was creating a problem. Jungkook's expression hardened. What problem? The investigator hesitated. Control. Jungkook stared at him. Control over what? You. The room became silent. Jimin looked at Jungkook. I told you. Jungkook turned toward him. Told me what? Jimin's eyes filled with tears. They were trying to separate us. I don't know. The investigator placed one final photograph on the table. It showed a person entering a building late at night. Jungkook recognized them. His face fell. No. Jimin covered his mouth. The person in the photograph was someone they had trusted. Someone who had always been close. Someone who had comforted them during difficult times. Jungkook couldn't speak. Jimin whispered. I didn't want you to know. Jungkook looked at him. How long? Long enough. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought if you knew, everything would collapse. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. Everything already collapsed. Jimin looked down. No. His voice trembled. You're still here. Jungkook sat beside him. I almost lost you, but you didn't. Jungkook took his hand. And I'm not going to lose you again. The truth became more complicated than either of them expected. The person in the photograph had not acted alone. They had been pressured by someone higher up. Some messages had been fabricated. Some threats had been exaggerated. Jimin had believed that staying silent could protect everyone. Instead, his silence had isolated him. He had begun doubting every person around him. Every message. Every invitation. Even Jungkook. That realization hurt more than the threats themselves. One evening, Jimin sat beside the hospital window. "I thought I was protecting you." Jungkook sat beside him. "You were protecting me from the wrong thing." "What do you mean?" "You were protecting me from knowing you were hurting." Jimin looked at him. Jungkook continued. "And that hurt me more." Jimin's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I know. I didn't want to become weak." "You weren't weak. I felt weak." "There's a difference." Jimin smiled sadly. "You always make everything sound simple." "It isn't simple." Jungkook looked at him. "But you don't have to solve everything tonight." Jimin leaned against the window. For the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. "I was so tired." "I know. I wanted someone to notice." Jungkook's heart broke. "I wish you had told me. I wish I had." Jungkook reached for his hand. "Then we'll do better from now on." Jimin smiled. "Together. Together." Outside, rain began falling. The same kind of rain that had covered the city the night Jimin entered the ICU. But this time, neither of them was alone. Episode 5. Months later, Jimin stood backstage beneath the warm glow of the stage lights. His hands trembled. "Nervous?" Jimin smiled. "A little." "Good." Jimin laughed. "Why is that good?" "Because you're admitting it." Jimin looked at him. A year ago, he would have hidden the fear. Now he didn't. The stage manager called them. The audience erupted. Jimin closed his eyes. For a moment, he remembered the ICU, the machines, the cold floor, Jungkook crying outside the doors, the letter, the fear. Then he opened his eyes. The lights came on. He stepped onto the stage. The music began. And he sang. His voice wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was honest. Every note carried something he had survived. Every breath reminded him that he was still here. When the performance ended, the crowd erupted into applause. Jimin looked toward Jungkook. Jungkook smiled. Afterward, they stood outside the venue. The night air was cool. Jimin looked at the sky. "I used to hate nights." "Why?" "Because that's when everything became quiet." Jungkook nodded. "And now?" "Now I don't mind silence." "Why?" Jimin smiled. "Because I know I'm not alone in it." Jungkook looked at him. "That's all I ever wanted you to know." Jimin's eyes became wet. "I know." They stood quietly. No dramatic promises. No perfect ending. Just two people who had survived something painful and had learned how to speak honestly. Jimin finally understood that strength wasn't pretending to be okay. It wasn't hiding fear behind a smile. It wasn't carrying every burden alone. Strength was admitting when something hurt. Strength was reaching for a hand. Strength was allowing someone to stay. And Jungkook understood something too. He couldn't protect Jimin from every painful moment. He couldn't erase the past. He couldn't guarantee that fear would never return. But he could listen. He could stay. He could remind Jimin that asking for help was never something to be ashamed of. Jimin looked at him. "Jungkook." "Yeah." "Thank you for staying." Jungkook smiled. "You don't have to thank me. I want to." "Then I'll accept it." Jimin laughed softly. The sound was warm. Real. Free. Jungkook looked toward the city lights. "Remember what you told me about counting lights?" Jimin nodded. "How many are there tonight?" Jimin looked around. He counted silently, then smiled. "Too many." "That's not a number." "I know." "Why aren't you counting?" Jimin looked at him. "Because I don't need to anymore." Jungkook understood. The habit that had once helped Jimin survive his loneliness had finally become unnecessary. They walked away from the venue together. Behind them,